A very good morning to everyone present here. I invite Dr. Motilal, Head, Department of Automobile Engineering, to give the welcome address.
Good morning to all. This is Dr. T. Motilal, Professor and Head of Automobile Department, KCG College of Technology. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to welcome Aditya Patel, International Race Car Driver, founder of X1 Racing League, and ultimately, and a warm welcome to all participants for this webinar. It's a privilege to introduce today's speaker, Aditya Patel. Aditya Patel is an Indian racing driver and represents Audi India Motorsport. Prior to this, he has competed in the Volkswagen Sirago R Cup, Polo Cup, Formula BMW Pacific, and the 24 hours of Nürburgring. Aditya was given his first taste of motorsport in a go-kart at the age of 4. He began participating in local go-karting events at the age of 11. Patel's international career began with the bank, notching up third place finish on his debut in the Formula BMW Pacific Championship in 2008. After a year of racing in Asia, Aditya was given an offer to race in the Volkswagen Polo Cup in Germany, which he accepted due to budget constraint in single-seater racing. In 2012, Patel was signed by Audi India and raced the 24 hours of Nürburgring in an Audi TT for Pro Handicap EV. He has given a drive in the JB Racing Asia Series, where he notched up 4 podium finishes and a win. And he became the first Indian to climb on the podium and win an international event at the Buddha International Circuit. In 2019, with fellow Indian driver Ibrahim, Aditya created the X1 Racing, the world's first professional franchise-based motorsport league. This is a short introduction of today's speaker. Now I request all the participants to mute your Zoom mic, turn off the video. Please post your queries in the QA section relevant to the topic. We will give the feedback link at the to the registered mail ID to all the participants. Please give the feedback after the session. E-certificate will be posted through the registered mail ID. Participants are requested to attend the complete session. I hope all the participants join the webinar through your full name. If not, rename it correctly. Thanks in advance for your cooperation. Now I invite Mr. Aditya Patel to take over the session.
Good morning, Mr. Motilal, and good morning, everybody who's here. First, I'd like to know if you all can hear me clearly.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to be part of this topic. In fact, especially when it's talking to a whole bunch of college students, to discuss the opportunities in the world of motorsport is very special to me because most people are not aware of what opportunities there are in the world of motorsport. And this is not just when it comes to being a race driver, but also when it comes to being an engineer. And of course, most of you who I'm talking to today are budding engineers. Some of you may be budding race drivers as well. And I'll be happy to entertain questions as we go on. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to just introduce you to the world of motorsport and the opportunities that there are through a presentation that I've made for you. It's very basic. It's not too advanced. It'll be very easy for all of you to understand. Just to give you an idea of how wide and how big this space is. A lot of you may think, yes, you are currently doing the SAE. You're aware of a few motorsport opportunities in India, maybe a few internationally. But to be honest, there's a lot more available worldwide and in India itself in terms of motorsport opportunity than you may think. And that's where I'm going to shed some light today. So I'm just going to share my screen here. All right. So I think you should be able to see my screen right now. I will put this on full screen. There we go. This is the introduction slide. All right. First, let me start with what is motorsport? Now, of course, a lot of you know what motorsport is, or you may think you know what motorsport is, but in basic terms, it is a global term used to encompass the group of competitive sports, which is primarily includes the use of motorized vehicles, whether it is for racing and competition or non-racing competition. It is also used to describe the forms of competition of two-wheeler vehicles under the banner of motorcycle racing. But today we will be discussing more in terms of four-wheeler racing, because that's where my background is. And it's a unique sport where the best engineering minds come together with the best racing drivers in order to compete at the highest level, be it in India, be it in Asia, be it worldwide. There is always the highest level in each region. At this stage, let me remind you, I'm not an engineer myself. I'm purely a race car driver. My education is economics, but I did this purely out of passion, and I continue to do so. And like Mr. Motilal mentioned in the introduction, I am the founder of the X1 Racing League, which premiered last year, and we'll continue to do so year after year. And also Ultimate E, which is an online racing platform for those of you who are interested in online sim racing. But again, what I would like to shed light on today is the different opportunities available in these particular platforms, as well as a budding engineer and as budding race car drivers, etc. So there are different forms of motorsport in India. Again, it's for a lot of you who are not aware, it's not just tied down to rallying, or not just tied down to the Volkswagen Cup, which you see a lot being talked about. Of course, there's go-karting. A lot of youngsters start with go-karting. We are now actually seeing a lot of budding engineers who are now getting into the go-karting space as well, as part of different go-karting teams to help engineer go-karts to perform at the highest level. So go-karting mostly does run in national championships in the form of the Rotax Max Challenge with a 125cc two-stroke Rotax engine. Then you have the very basic form of four-wheeler racing, or you could even call it some form of motorsport. It's a TST rally. This happens on your public roads in a very safe form. It's time, speed, distance, which basically means that you can do it at a slow pace, and it's very important to follow your pace notes really, really well. So penalties come with every second, which means that, for example, you may have to average 20 kilometers per hour. But what's important is that for that 1 hour, that 20 kilometers average has to be to the second. And there can be time controls to make sure you haven't, and these time controls come by surprise, and they are there to make sure you haven't exceeded or you haven't gone slower than the stipulated time given to you. Then you have the Gymkhana and the autocross. Basically, this gives anybody really, even again, just like TST rallies, even you, if you own a car or if you own a bike, a lot of competitions take place all around the country. In Chennai as well, all the metro cities, and even some of the smaller cities as well, where you can just go participate and have fun and enjoy yourself. It is a form of motorsport. I have friends who have taken their cars, they've actually tuned their cars, tuned their suspension, tuned the engines very lightly to actually be more competitive in these championships. Again, it gave someone like me very good knowledge of the basics of a car to be a part of an autocross championship. So it's again something that is very interesting, and it is very good for Indian motorsport, and could be something interesting for all of you who are watching. Drag racing is again another form of motorsport where anybody can participate. Again, all it requires is a car. You just need to have a few safety features inside the car, nothing too expensive. And you can go and participate. There are maybe 4 or 5 drag races that happens within the country in different cities. A lot of drag racing happens in Chennai itself at the MMRT circuit. And in many places around you, in Coimbatore, there are drag races. Bangalore, there are drag races. Mumbai, Delhi, etc. Because all you need is a straight strip of road. And what they do is they close it off. There's nothing illegal. Again, it is run by the Federation of Motorsports Clubs in India. And you can go there in your bike and your car and participate. And again, very little tuning needs to be done. Even as simple as playing with your tire pressures. These are some things that people actually do in drag racing, as simple as tire pressures, a little bit of aero, adding a wing, reducing drag, increasing drag, based on whatever you feel like. Of course, you try to use drag as much as you can in drag racing because it's purely a straight line sprint. Then you have circuit racing. This is where I come from. This is my background. So I started with go-karting and then moved to circuit racing. Now, circuit racing, what you see in India is basically your starting out point to entering the world of motorsport. You've got single-seater cars, which earlier when I started was the Formula Maruti. It used to run with the Maruti 800 engine, single-seater chassis made in India itself. You've got the Formula 1600 cars, once again made in India, with Ford 1600 engines. You have the Formula LGB 1300, which has the Suzuki Swift engine. You have the MRF 2000. So these are cars I'll run you through in the next slide. But again, each of these different categories give not just race drivers, but also an engineer an opportunity to be part of motorsport at the most basic level within the country itself, which again gives everybody a great opportunity and great scope. And then there's bike racing, which pretty much does the same. You've got bike rallying, bike racing. So again, it's very easily accessible if you live in a city that has a racetrack, or if you live in a place where there's a lot of rallying that takes place. And again, it is starting to grow in the country. So what's interesting with all these different forms of motorsport is it gives a range of people opportunities to be part in the sport, be it a race driver, be it a bike racer, be it a mechanic, be it an engineer, be it a part of a management team, be it part of marketing, be it part of social media. There are many opportunities. Every team requires people to come together to be able to run a racing team in any of these forms of motorsport. Then you've got competitive motorsport across the globe. Now, this is something a lot of you may have seen. Most of you are aware of Formula One. Formula One, I do agree, is the pinnacle of motorsport, but it's not the only motorsport. It's a question I get asked whenever I tell somebody I'm a race car driver. People say, oh, you're a Formula One driver. But that's not the case. You don't necessarily have to be a Formula One driver to actually be a race driver. You can be racing in any other form of motorsport. And I've actually not even listed all of them. These are just pretty much what's more known to people worldwide. So you've got the ladder going to Formula One. If you want to be a Formula One driver, there's F4, F3, F2, F1. Super Formula is a Japanese championship. Again, a lot of people do it between Formula 2 and Formula 1. And in Japan, in fact, it's the pinnacle of their motorsport. It's almost like IndyCar to America, Super Formula to Japan. And hopefully one day we'll have a pinnacle for India itself, so you don't have to go outside. Then you've got GT3 racing. Now, GT3 racing basically is what I took part in. As you heard in the introduction, I signed with Volkswagen Motorsport in 2009. Then I moved on to Audi. And with Audi for the last 7-8 years, I've been driving GT3 cars, which is the Audi R8 GT3. Now, again, I'll show you pictures as we go on, but a GT3 car is a supercar. Basically, 50% of a GT3 car shares its DNA with the road car, and 50% is purely a race car. So when I show you a picture, you'll understand better. Then there's Super GT, which is a Japanese GT championship and DTM. Then you've got touring car racing, like your Volkswagen championship in India, your ITC championship in India, and even your IJTC championship in India with very basic race cars. The World Endurance Championship, again, a very popular championship worldwide. These cars are Le Mans prototype. I'll show you again a picture of the LMP1 car in the next slide. Then you've got rallying, rallycross. And what's more interesting now and very popular during this lockdown period is sim racing. So a lot of you may not be aware of what sim racing is, but this is a form of motorsport and becoming very popular now, recognized by the FIA as well, which allows you to sit at home and participate in races worldwide using a simulator cockpit. Now, all this needs is a steering wheel, which you get from different gaming manufacturers, simulator manufacturers, and maybe even a cockpit if you want. But a lot of people just use a chair like the chair I'm sitting on, use a table like the table my computer is on, and they take part in worldwide competitions. So it's very accessible, very affordable, and you can race against the best in the world just sitting at home. What we've seen recently, particularly during this lockdown period, a lot of great Indian talent has been coming out and participating against some of the best in the world, like guys like Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, George Russell. We have seen Indian drivers on the same grid as them. So it's, again, a great opportunity, this form of motorsport, which is probably one of the cheapest forms of motorsport and getting expensive as we go on, because people are starting to build better equipment to be able to compete at the highest level. But what's interesting, again, about sim racing is it's not just for the driver sitting at home. What I've learned recently is that a lot of engineers, particularly during this lockdown period, as they haven't been doing much racing in a real world racetrack, have been lending their knowledge to sim racing drivers. These guys have actually been helping them tune their race cars for the game. And again, because it's called sim racing, it's simulator racing, just like your simulator aircraft pilots use to train for flying. It's the same thing. So you can actually tune your cars just like you tune a real race car to perform in a game. And this is another very interesting avenue that I have seen for budding engineers, and again for people who can't afford real world motorsport, or people who want to take a completely different trajectory to motorsport, just sitting in their home. So I will be touching upon these topics as we go along. Yeah. All right. So I'll show you a few pictures of the race cars. I did briefly talk about them just now, but this should give you a better idea of what they look like now. Of course, this you see there is a go-kart, but it's just for entertainment purposes. I've used that picture. Nothing happened to any of those true drivers. In fact, I'm one of them. My kart is the one on top. The other is a competitor below. Not a single scratch. But again, so that's what a go-kart looks like. People may think go-karting is for it's a toy and things like that, but it can get very competitive. And at the end of the day, motorsport is a dangerous sport. No matter how safe you try to keep it, it is a dangerous sport. But we have seen a lot of advancements in technology over the last few years. So it is getting safer by the day. Then you've got the SAE car, as you see in this picture over here. These are cars built by college students like you to participate against other colleges all around the country and also around the world. Again, a very basic form of motorsport. It's not just a college exam for you. It's actually a form of motorsport where you've got someone driving it, got someone putting it through a test to see how good this machine is that you have built. Next to that, to the right, you see the Formula LGB, which is a 1300, like I mentioned, with the Swift engine. A very basic, very cheap form of motorsport, followed by the car below, the one below the go-kart, is the MRF 2000. This actually is the pinnacle of Indian motorsport at the moment. We see a lot of drivers coming from all around the world to participate in this championship. We see a lot of Indian engineers, actually, some of the best engineers in the country, motorsport engineers who are part of this championship. And they worked right from not just running the car on the track, but building the car, building the engine, putting the entire chassis together, the aerodynamics, as well as running the car on the track. So the cars are built by JA Motorsport. It has given a lot of young Indians an opportunity to actually be a part of the sport as engineers, not just as race drivers. And the same goes for the Formula 1600 car that comes from the same stable. Then you've got what you're looking at is the big Formula 1 car. Of course, I've skipped the F4, F3, F2. That's too many pictures to put and talk about. But as you can see, there is a big difference from your basic SAE or your LGB car, which is what all youngsters in India at least start out on, which then moves to the Formula 2000 car and then to the Formula 1 car. So there is a huge difference, of course, in terms of speed, in terms of aerodynamics, in terms of a lot of things that go into it. Of course, cost, there's a big difference. And next to that, you've got the latest, which is the Formula E car. I think I've got a question over here. Sorry, photo is not clear. Anyway, not sure which photo, but anyway, so then there's the Formula E car. Formula E is probably going to be the future of motorsport. We don't know yet. Of course, all the purists are still rooting for Formula 1, but Formula E is the electric formula. With the increasing level of pollution worldwide, we are seeing a huge shift towards electric mobility, and I'm sure you all know that really well. And in motorsport, Formula E has most of the manufacturers participating. You have Mahindra from India, who is part of Formula E. You have Audi, you have Nissan, you have Mercedes-Benz, Jaguar, Porsche, and a few others, so there's I think 7 or 8 manufacturers currently in Formula E, and a lot more who are moving towards Formula E, which makes it a very interesting space for motorsport and for viewers as well. Of course, there's no hiding from the fact that electric mobility is the future. Now, the question is going to be whether it will take over from Formula 1. Right now, it looks highly doubtful, but 5-10 years down the line, you don't know what's going to happen. We don't see too many electric cars on the road now, but we are definitely going to start seeing electric cars in the near future. Again, now what's interesting about Formula E is that someone like Mahindra, who is an Indian manufacturer, they are a part of this sport. And we know that Mahindra has been building electric cars for a long time. And these people do give opportunities, again, for budding engineers and budding race drivers to be a part of it. Of course, right now we haven't seen any Indian race drivers, but we do see Indians as part of the background team in Mahindra. So they are, again, a very interesting prospect in India. So now that I've finished this slide, I think I can answer a couple of questions. Is there an opportunity to bring Formula E for Indian drivers like LGB? Well, it's my assumption to your question is that do LGB drivers get a chance to drive Formula E? Well, at the moment, you have to go through a big ladder to actually be a part of Formula E. Again, Formula E has some of the best drivers in the world, but of course, there are always opportunities to be a part of it as a race driver, as part of the team. So yes, there's always opportunities. And like I said, Mahindra is part of Formula E, and they are an Indian team and always open to opportunities for Indian, I'm sure. Why does Tata not participate in these competitions? Well, Tata, of course, directly doesn't participate in motorsport. They did have what's called the Tata Truck Racing Championship. So they used trucks to actually race. Tata actually, they have a truck racing championship, used to have a truck racing championship, and they raced against truck drivers internationally. There were Indian truck drivers, but it will be interesting to see Tata enter the Indian motorsport space, hopefully sometime in the future, particularly in the electric segment. I'm really looking forward to that because they are growing in the electric segment. What about Tesla cars? Well, Tesla cars, of course, they are. There's not really much you can say about them in India right now because we don't have any over here, of course. But they are very futuristic. They do exist, and it's very interesting to see people actually what they say about these cars. I've never been in one, so I would love to see Teslas in India. There may be one or two right now, but I'd love to see them in the flesh. In the upcoming days, will there be electric cars that we can achieve at the same speed as Link IC engines? Well, definitely. I mean, electric cars, of course, they have a lot of torque because the drive goes straight to the wheels. So we do see very, very fast electric cars. The only drawback with electric cars at the moment is, of course, the range which they give and the difficulty in charging them. But we are seeing fast charge actually starting to come into play. So it will be interesting. It's almost as fast as charging your phone and maybe even faster to have fast charge in electric cars. So that's why I said as soon as 5 years down the line, you could see many, many electric cars because they're very fast. As long as you can top them up quickly, they'll be very user-friendly. But for now, in my opinion, I think electric cars are very good to use in the city. Long distance, of course, it may be a little difficult to use an electric car. That's a lot of questions coming in right now. So I'm actually going to go back to my slide and I'll come back to these questions in a few minutes. All right, so those were single-seater race cars. Now these are a slightly different form of race cars over here. What we're looking at, the first picture is this Maruti Suzuki SX4, which is your very basic form of racing. Like I said, your autocross, you can take your own car, you can take part in it. It's very safe. It's done in controlled environments, controlled speeds, and very enjoyable as well. Then you've got your Indian touring cars, your Volkswagen Amio Cup car, which is for Indian standards, it's actually on par with some of the basic touring cars around the world. And again, it gives a lot of youngsters an opportunity to be a part of motorsport at different levels. The next step is your TCR car, which they use actually in the World Touring Car Championship, which I can tell you is not too big a step from your Indian Amio Cup car. But again, being in a part of a world championship, the costs are very, very high. It's very competitive. There are many manufacturers involved and gives you a chance to be a part of whichever manufacturer you really like to. Again, but all these opportunities when it comes to the World Touring Car means you'd have to move abroad and be a part of a manufacturer's outfit in another country. Then there's the GT3 car at the bottom over there. That's the car I spoke about earlier. LMP2 car, LMP1 car. So what you're looking at here is the LMP1 Porsche. Again, hybrid technology used in this car, which made it one of the most successful cars that there has been in the LMP1 space. And then you've got the World Rally Championship car. This again looks like your regular Polo. To my knowledge, actually, the WRC car for Hyundai, lots of it is built in the factory in Chennai itself, which means that there are a lot of engineers working out of that factory to build race cars. And then there's what I call the living room race car, which is this. It's a sim racing machine. This, like I said before, sim racing is growing. It's very popular. As you can see, it has a steering wheel. You get steering wheels with actually direct drive systems, which is great. It gives you a lot of good feedback. brake pedals as well, which feel very realistic, very much like a race car. And this is something you can actually fit in your home and be a part of different championships all around the world just by sitting inside your house. The scope of engineering and racing. Now, obviously, this is something I wanted to talk to all of you about a little bit more in detail. So motorsport all around the world is driven by engineers. A car cannot be built just by pressing a button on a computer and say build a race car. No, some of the best minds sit together actually for all these different manufacturers and put race cars together, because these cars have to perform at the highest level, lap after lap, minute after minute, second after second. I drive these cars, so I know how much I'm pushing them compared to your road car. Let me give you a simple example. The tires for your road car, it's very easy to make them run for 30, 40,000 kilometers, or even more, 60, 70,000 kilometers, depending on how you use them. But I guess 30 would be the average, the safe lifespan for a tire. But that same tire, you take it on a racetrack. If you drive at 100% with the same road tire on the racetrack, I would give it about 40 kilometers as against 30,000 or 40,000 kilometers. 40, 50 kilometers, sometimes you'll run through a set of tires. So this will actually give you an idea of how much load and how much stress a car goes through. And you guys already know this as well. And this is why no car can get onto the racetrack before actually going through a bunch of different design engineers, right from the engine design, right from the aerodynamics engineers, right from the chassis design, suspension. Everybody actually comes together to then build what's required to put a race car on the racetrack. And what's interesting now with motorsport is that a lot of these different forms of motorsport are trying to be as close as possible to the road car. So like I said before, a GT3 car, for example, shares 50% of its DNA with an actual road car. And this helps to develop road cars a lot better as well. So without the combining force of all these engineers, it is literally impossible. You can't really put a car on the track. You can't really expect a computer to build these cars. Neither can you expect a driver to actually tell someone what to do to build these cars. It again has to be the best of minds working together. So Indian motorsport, there are many opportunities available. You have VW Motorsport, who from the factory build race cars from scratch. But again, there's a lot of their cars that share their DNA with their road cars. For example, their VW Ameo Cup car shares a lot of its parts with the VW Ameo road car. Of course, it's a stripped down version of it. You have a roll cage, you have a DSG, you have a racing gearbox, which means the DSG gearbox is removed, replaced by a racing sequential gearbox. Then you have single seater racing. Like I said, all these teams require a whole bunch of engineers to be working around it. Rallying, very popular in Indian motorsport, has always been popular for years, from the Himalayan Rally, the Dakshin Dare, the South India Rally, the Karnataka 1000, and it continues to go on right now. And in rallies these days, we see 100 plus cars actually participating. And again, these 100 plus cars can't get onto a rally stage without actually being rally prepared or race prepared. So, which means that they have to have the right suspension, they have to have the right safety equipment, they have to be ready for breakdowns at any point of time. The engineers and the drivers have to communicate so that the drivers are aware of what they need to do to repair the car in the middle of a stage. And again, all of them, if you have 100 cars, you have at least 40 teams, 30 teams, 30 tuners working against each other to try and be the best. And this is where the greatest of Indian racing minds come together to actually build a car for motorsport. And it's not just rallying, but it's touring cars, it's single-seater racing, it's bike racing, no matter what it is. And you don't have to be a part of a team. In fact, you can even be a privateer. So a privateer is someone who, out of their own passion, can take their car, prepare it as per the technical specs given to them for a rally, for a race, and just run it. You know, you can either get a driver to come and race it for you, or you can race it yourself. So that's what's great about Indian motorsport is there's a lot you can do yourself. It gives everybody an opportunity to be a part of the sport. And it's something that most people don't know about. And it's something that I would like to share with you is that, you know, there's so much scope for all of you. It's not just about ending it at SAE and then going and looking for a job anywhere and for any form of automotive. The motorsport has a huge scope and it is starting to grow. Of course, in these times of coronavirus, everything has taken a back seat, but it will bounce back for sure. Then when you come to international motorsport, of course, manufacturers, all the manufacturers have a motorsport division. I have a few friends who are working currently for Hyundai in their motorsport division. Then you have Formula One teams. We know a lot of people who are working for various Formula One teams. And of course, Formula E, like I said, Mahindra is an interesting place that being an Indian manufacturer gives a lot of people an opportunity and the reach actually to try and be a part of the Mahindra racing team. Sim racing, well, yes, like I said before, it's very interesting space for engineers and drivers to actually be sitting in their living rooms and making a living at the same time, because it's so competitive. It's the drivers have to be at the top of the game. For them to be at the top of their game, they need to be able to communicate with an engineer who's sitting in his or her living room to be at the top of their game. And that's what really makes this very interesting as a space. Like I said, I'm part of Ultimate E, and we are actually a part of the sim racing space. And the amount we learn every day when drivers come to us and say, yes, I spoke to my engineer yesterday. We're like, how did you speak to your engineer? Your engineer is actually tuning your car. And it's great to see the kind of interest that people are actually putting into this. And it gives us the knowledge and the wherewithal that there's opportunities everywhere. But again, this doesn't mean that you don't face challenges. Yes, there are challenges all around. At the end of the day, there are so many engineers just like you who are actually out there to, whether it is to be an automotive engineer, whether you want to be mechanical, whether it's racing even. So many of you are out there for a very small space. Right now, it is a small space. There's no doubt. And it's growing. So you have to really be some of the best in the business to actually be a part of this space. And I think we just go through some questions. I've already worked with MCART. So Pranav says, I've already worked with MCART, ECART. What do I want to do to grow up with big crews and higher studies for it? Well, there are, of course, higher studies for this. In India, I'm not so sure, but internationally, yes, there are different programs that give people the opportunity in motorsport masters, etc. And of course, I think you should ask the KCG College and the Hindustan College of Engineering. I'm sure they have a good knowledge of motorsport engineering as well. But yes, I do know of people who are building e-carts in India. And going by that, there's definitely scope, according to me. How many Indian companies are participating? Well, Hyundai participates in motorsport. Maruti participates in motorsport in rallying for the most bit. Volkswagen participates in motorsport. Mahindra. So there are a lot of people participating in motorsport. Again, showing that there's great opportunities. Interesting question. How to approach Mahindra for opportunities, and what are the minimum qualifications to be a racer? Well, I think the most basic qualification to be a racer one is to actually have the passion for it. You can't really have a formal education to be a race driver. You can have a formal education to be an engineer. And how do you approach Mahindra? Well, I guess, again, just like hunting for a job, you find the right person within Mahindra, you use LinkedIn or whatever you can use. You can go onto the Mahindra website, contact them. To be honest, that would obviously be a good way to approach Mahindra. And as far as being a race driver goes, yeah, you have the passion for it, you get into it, and if you love it, you do it. If you don't enjoy it, you just don't do it. That's the way I do it. Sirish Satya says, I remember seeing Maruti S-Team racing. Do they still happen? Yes. What's interesting is S-Teams actually still go around the racetrack, and the S-Team is a very, very old car, as you're aware. But yes, we do still see S-Teams in the IJTC category, but they are being given competition by Volkswagens and Hondas. So they are being, but they're still very competitive cars considering their age. Of course, yes, there is there opportunity for mechanical engineers? Yes, there is an opportunity for really any kind of engineer out there, software engineer, mechanical engineer, automotive engineer. Obviously, yes, there's different fields in which motorsport in India at least is looking for talent. And so, yes, there are opportunities for mechanical engineers. Can we use PHEV instead of electric? You'd have to kind of elaborate a bit more for me on that question. So you could ask it further down. As a middle class boy, how can I join a team racing cars? Is it too expensive? So, well, if you want to race, if you want to create race cars, well, obviously, if you have an education in a college like KCG Hindustan, there are many manufacturers looking for people like you. And so there are opportunities for you to actually join them and have a job with them. But it's only too expensive if you yourself want to be a race car driver. Yes, of course, it is expensive, and that's something that's very hard to kind of avoid right now in the early stages. But Indian motorsport compared to other motorsport is relatively cheap, I can tell you that. But yes, like I said many times in this presentation, you have opportunities with manufacturers. What other racing fields, just like you said, the truck racing? Well, there are many different racing fields, and I've kind of mentioned almost everyone over here. There's truck racing, car racing, bike racing, and all in different forms. So as you can see, you can get all that information from this presentation. Sorry, you joined in. Well, I mentioned earlier in this presentation, actually, I studied economics. I didn't study engineering, but my pure passion is to be a race car driver, and which is how I got into it. How I joined Audi was thanks to the success I had in the previous years, and Audi was looking for a race car driver in India to grow in that space. And I was fortunate to be there at that point in time. And yeah, that's how I came in with Audi. Which is the best F1 car? Obviously, a Formula One fan, there's a lot of great F1 cars out there. All the teams do work at the highest level. And what's the thing about Formula One is the budgets are very, very high. I'm going to get to that later on in this particular presentation. And the teams are looking at spending $200 to $300 million a year just to run a Formula One car, which if you can convert it using your converter, it's a lot of money. Is the F1 car's battery reusable after a race? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I would imagine not. Formula One, again, the costs involved is very high. They don't take any chances. So whatever they can change, they change after a race. Of course, they used to do it before with engines, and now there's a limit to how many engines you can change during the year. But again, like I said, because the costs are so high, they probably don't take chances with batteries. Internal combustion engines are more reliable for long drive, but can we use electric cars? Like I said, of course, electric cars in the future are going to be usable for long drives for sure. What will make it more usable, of course, batteries will become better, but it's the fast charging technology that's going to be interesting to see what can happen with it. Is sim racing useful? Absolutely useful. It is a little different to your real racing car, but what makes it very close to your real racing car is the fact that you actually have to follow the same racing lines. You can actually tune it like you tune your real race car, so you learn a lot about the nitty-gritties of a car without actually having to be at the racetrack. If you're not an engineer like me, you learn a lot about the car while sitting at home and actually experimenting and trying it. For all of you who are engineers and want to understand what a driver goes through, it is something that you could use, and I think would be something that would be interesting for your college to invest in, because it's a lot cheaper than actually investing in a car. And you can actually tune these cars while sitting in a chair, and then try it, and you see all the differences while you're sitting at home. All right, I will come back to these next questions later on. I'm just going back into my presentation. But it's good to see so many questions coming in. Sorry, I'm just trying to change the page. Yeah, got it. All right, so I've spoken about everything that happens off track and the opportunities available off track, etc., etc. But once you are a race engineer on track, and a race car driver on track, what's very important is that the two gel together. So it's not about sitting behind your computer screen and sending information out for something to be built somewhere else. When you get to the racetrack, the engineers and the race drivers work in tandem. Now, again, when I go to school or college, I don't have a course that teaches me how to be a race driver. But you can actually go for an engineering course in a college, be it in India, be it anywhere else in the world. There are some courses, there are many courses available for race engineering, not the same for race car drivers. So the mentality of an engineer and the mentality of a race driver are two very different things. The race driver learns through his or her knowledge and through his or her experience as they go through the years. And of course, they do have sometimes a driver coach to teach them. An engineer has a formal education. And again, when you're working with a car, there's only so much you can do. I mean, you have to work with the mechanics of a car to make it better. So it's very important that you know the inside out of how a machine works. And to then have a race car driver and engineer work together is very important, because someone like me, not being an engineer, I learn a lot from the engineer. But when two engineers, if there is a race car driver who's an engineer, works with an engineer, then I can imagine it's difficult. And in these highly intense situations at a racetrack, it is very important for both engineers, race drivers to be calm and focused, because you are working at the highest level. What's very interesting and what I have found out as a race driver is that I've worked with many engineers over the years, and no two engineers are the same. Each engineer has a different ideology. And what's again very interesting is while they make the car feel different through their different engineering ideologies, particularly with the suspension, because you're only allowed to do a lot of suspension changes and not particularly allowed to touch engines when you're at the racetrack. I found that engineers who do different setups on the car can in the end actually pull out the same result. But as a driver, even though the car feels different, you still cross the finish line with probably the same lap time or a better lap time. So it's very interesting to see how engineers who have been educated by the book can actually still experiment and make the car perform the way a driver or a team would want it to perform. And then what's very important and gives them that is that their creativity and their intuition based on their situation actually helps them do this. So when it rains, the engineer knows what to do, what exactly to do to change things. Some engineers are a little bit more conservative. Some engineers like to do many things at the same time. And I personally like to work with engineers who like to experiment and not really with the conservative ones. Of course, the conservative ones take things step by step, but it's a long process. Communication is very important. If you are a budding engineer, I think it's very important for you to know that you do need to be able to communicate with the race driver to understand what he or she wants. If you aren't able to communicate properly with the race driver, things become very, very difficult. It becomes harder for you to actually put a race car together, harder for you to put a winning race car together. And then again, it leads to fights. It's an unnecessary situation when you can't communicate. So it's very important for you to work on your communication skills. Try and work with as many people around you together as a team to then build on it. So for those of you who are part of SAE teams, it's very important that the entire engineering team works with the person who's driving the car. Listen to the drivers. The drivers also very important that they listen to the engineers. It's the only way to make a car go faster. Once egos start coming into play, and we see this a lot, then things start to go backwards. So the engineer says, no, I know what to do. You're the driver. You drive the car. It never works. If the driver says, I know what to do. You're the engineer. You do what I tell you to do to the car. Once again, it never works. So like I said, right at the bottom, the engineer is usually not a race car driver, and a race car driver is usually not an engineer. And this is something that people need to keep in mind when they go driving race cars. An interesting part of this topic, again, because a lot of people think that motorsport is Formula One. I would like to talk about the difference in short between Formula One and other racing cars. Well, of course, Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. It is at the highest level worldwide. You do have different championships in America and in Japan trying to compete, but they can never be Formula One purely because of the commercial value that Formula One has, which means that the teams involved are spending loads and loads of money, like I said before. And this means that they have to hire the best engineers, which means they have the best brains in terms of management, engineering, all the different kinds of engineers you require to put together a Formula One car, right from your tires to your suspension, to your components, to your aerodynamics, to your chassis, everything. everything, they need to have the best of the best. And this means that if there are 10 teams, there's only very limited availability of space because there are so many people trying to get into this space. Again, then once they have those people, they need to have the highest quality of these components. Then they have to have the best drivers in the world. Again, you can only have 22 of the best drivers in the world. So if I am trying to fight for that space, I'm trying to be one of the best 20. Right now it's 20 drivers, so I'm trying to be one among those 20. We do have a few Indians who are now currently trying to try and be in that space, and hopefully in the next 2 years we'll see someone like Jahan Daruwala there. Of course, the cost, when you have to make sure everything is the best of the best, then it doesn't come cheap. Just to put things in perspective, if you want to drive a race car in India at the very basic level, you're looking at around 3 to 4 lakhs, which is 300 to 400,000 Indian rupees. But if you want to race in Formula One, or if a team wants to run a Formula One team of 2 cars, like I said before, you're looking at $300 million, $400 million. That's a lot of money. That's close to $500 million per year. And some of the best teams actually get to close to that, to almost $500 million per year. So it's not exactly cheap, I can tell you that. But again, it is the pinnacle of motorsport worldwide. And there's a reason it costs as much as it costs. Now, people are starting to put budget caps in place to change that. But again, it is Formula One. And like I showed you previously in this presentation, there are many opportunities in many different worlds of motorsports for race drivers like me. And I found out because I actually experimented. I tried to jump into a different space in motorsport, and I actually found my calling there. So I think for any engineer as well, as much as you want to be a Formula One engineer, there are many different spaces in motorsport that give you opportunities to enter. And again, you can even be a mechanical engineer, like someone asked me in the questions before, and still find yourself a space in the motorsport world. Before I go on to this slide, I will answer a few questions. Again, it's good to see so many questions coming in. Scroll up, I think. Yeah. What would be required to work with a motorsport company as an engineer? So Yash Naidu asked this question. I think it's very important, one, that you have the passion to be an engineer. I did work with a few people last year, actually who were students as well. But, the passion needs to be there. Very few of them showed that passion to learn. Some of them, just wanted to just be there and look at race cars. So I think that passion to actually be an engineer, to learn, to want to succeed and to want to win is very important. And of course, your education and your background needs to be very, very strong. Your knowledge about the car needs to be very, very strong. You need to read a lot of books, and that will actually help you in the motorsport world. What is the cost of a sim racing set? What's your preferable company to buy a sim car racing set? Well, this is an interesting question. I actually wanted to talk about this, but I think it skipped my mind. You get varied levels of sim racing sets. You can make the basic cockpit in any machining unit nearby. You just have to find a few designs that you like online, and you can actually make it. I did one like that as well. But you'd have to buy a steering wheel. I bought one from Logitech, but a Logitech would cost you about 15 to 20,000 rupees. And then it comes with a steering wheel and pedal. You need to have a PC as well. So your PC again costs you some money. But I think to put an entire kit together, a basic kit, including your TV, your PC, your steering wheel, it'll cost you just under a lakh of rupees, I think. So that's your basic kit, probably less than that. But again, I am including the cost of putting a PC as well. So gaming PCs can get quite expensive. That's the most expensive bit of it. And then costs do go up. Costs go up to about 30, 40 lakhs these days. It's very, very expensive because people are being more competitive in this space. Hi, sir, in a Formula car, can we keep a turbo and a supercharger in it? Well, I'm not sure about Formula cars, but I know that in touring cars, people have done this, have a supercharger and a turbocharger so that it's active at the entire RPM range. And you guys are students, you should definitely give it a shot. I'm pretty sure it's possible to do. Uma Maheshwar, in India, SAE is conducting SAE Supra for engineering college students. Most of the engineering students do participate in it by spending about 10 lakhs 25 for a team of 10 to 25 students. Do you have any suggestion on a better alternative for students to get into? Well, of course, the SAE, the Formula SAE is very college student oriented, which gives college students the opportunity to build an entire car from scratch, working on it as a project. Currently, nobody else gives college students the opportunity to do so. But for example, manufacturers in Coimbatore, like LG Sports or JA Motorsport, these are people I'm sure who'd be more than happy to actually have college students come over and be a part of this entire building process. And, you know, it helps to actually spread the knowledge, spread the awareness of motorsport in the country. But then again, it all starts with basically the SAE. Motorsport is expensive. From what I know, you guys use even engines from the KTM Duke. It costs money to put all this together. But for about 10 lakhs, it is still cheap, because building any race car does cost close to 5 or 10 lakhs. And from there on, obviously, if you're racing a car year after year, running it then becomes cheaper. I've heard that a driver performs 100 hours of simulation for 1 hour. Well, I'm not sure what exactly that means, but yes, a driver does perform. Some sim drivers sit on the simulator for 8 to 10 hours a day to actually help them perform better on the racetrack. Maybe 7-8 hours is actually 1 hour of actually driving on the track. So yes, the simulator doesn't give you the G forces, or it doesn't make you as tired as a real race car. How do you start a racing career? South India registration steps, regulation. This is an interesting question. If you want to start a racing career, of course, like I said, you need to have the passion for it. South India is a hotbed for motorsport, and it gives a lot of people an opportunity to enter this sport in bikes, cars, rallying, etc. You can get more details from the FMSCI website, the Federation of Motorsports Clubs in India. The regulations, the rules, everything is there. You can apply for a license, and you can be a part of motorsport in the most basic form, right from go-karting upwards. In India, technology is moving towards electric cars, but how will people buy, as the initial cost is very high, charging time is 14-15 hours? This is a very good question, but I'm sure you yourself know that once the numbers start to increase, the cost of the car will come down. It's obviously a numbers game over here. They're building right now, I think Hyundai, the particular car you're talking about, they sold very, very few cars. And when you build only a few numbers, the cost is going to be high. But as you start building more cars, the cost will start to come down. As you start to have more competition in the market, the cost will also start to become more competitive. And that's when it'll be affordable. And like I said, fast charging, we're seeing cars being charged in 30 minutes now, and it's going to get quicker and quicker. So that's going to be very interesting to see. How did you get an opportunity in race cars? Well, I was very fortunate actually as a kid to have the sport all around me, and my father used to race as well. He used to be an engineer, a tuner for race cars, and that's how I got into it, but I never really got into the engineering side of it. I'm very passionate about racing from my childhood. What am I supposed to do to become a race driver? I think I've answered this question before. It's all about passion. Jump into go-karts, and you can be a race driver. Do we have benefits in saloon car racing? Well, yes. If you want to be a part of motorsport in any form, you may not have particularly ambitions to go to Formula One, but you can race in saloon car racing in India and enjoy it as much as you want to. So yeah, there are. The benefits of it is just being a part of the sport, enjoying it, and actually being able to, if you are a tuner, tune the best saloon car in the country. Okay, there's some repeat questions. I'll just go back to this, the challenges faced by teams and drivers. Well, obviously motorsport is expensive. So when you look at these two, you're looking at budgets being point number one. For drivers, it's very expensive. For teams, it's expensive. Now, why is it expensive for a team? Well, a team has to put together the best engineers from that region. They have to put together the best crew, which means your best mechanics, your best tire mechanics, your best, your fastest mechanics in general, who you can find. So that costs money. To invest in a machine. So at the end of the day, the team actually needs to buy a machine, invest in the machine, or build a machine if they're a manufacturer. So that again costs a lot of money. So all this comes under budgets as well. But then why is it expensive for a driver? not in all cases do drivers actually have the opportunity to drive for a team. If you are starting out as a young budding race driver, somebody has to cover these costs. A team is not going to just simply have the money to throw. For them, it's a business to actually run a crew, run a race car, and then look for a driver who can cover these costs and still help in them getting some profits. So if you are a budding team owner, we see many team owners in India as well who are doing this. And it's good to see that it's becoming a business. And then there are many race drivers who are very opportunistic and also very ambitious who get into the sport and give these teams an opportunity to build it as a business. So budgets are very important. The drivers do end up having to pay for the crew, the machine, etc., etc. Then you've got the driver's communication skills is very important. When I say communication here, it's not particularly just communication with the team. It's the ability to be able to communicate with sponsors, to be able to communicate with people who can provide that driver with the opportunity to show people that he or she can be the best in this sport, in this space, to be able to gain sponsors for their budgets. And then again, there's a point on sponsors below, which is very important. Then the team sometimes has to invest in a driver. Now, every team wants to show that they are the best. So while they may have 3-4 drivers actually paying to come and drive for them, they will always have that one driver who they pay, who will show to the rest of the world that that team is probably the best. And this is more like a marketing tool for them to bring more drivers in. The organization, which basically means they have to transport their cars also. They need to have an entire team around that, your management, etc. So these are challenges faced by teams all around the world, is actually putting together the best of what you see over here. As far as the driver goes, you have to be fit, you have to be talented. If you're not talented, then, I mean, you're not going to enjoy it. There's no point really trying to spend more and more money, because money can't buy talent. Talent comes from within you. Sponsors, again, you need to have good communication skills to actually go out and get sponsors to be able to be successful in the sport. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult. Knowledge and support, you need to have the support from your family, and you need to have the knowledge about the sport as well. So we've almost done 1 hour over here, and then brings you to the end of this presentation. I hope it's been insightful. I'm going to answer a few questions now. And very good questions that I'm seeing as well coming here. So that's good to see. Now, where did I close off? Yes, sorry. I think I may have lost you for a second there.
Sir, now we can answer.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Now we can start the session, sir.
Great. I'll just go back to the questions. I think my computer crashed, so I'm just joining from my mobile. Okay. I seem to have lost the questions from before. And in the meantime, I'll try. So please do do fill in with your questions. I can only see 2 questions right now. I'm extremely sorry about that. So which racing car in India gives you more exposure like the Supra or other leagues? Please name. Well, I would say the Formula LGB gives you very good exposure to start with in India. So it is something that all of you should look into. In many ways, it's different to the Supra, but in a lot of ways, it's the same. Of course, this runs with a car engine and your Supra runs with a bike engine. In what months and how much duration do different motorsports take place? Well, motorsports takes place through the year. Particularly, it does slow down during the monsoon period, but otherwise, rest of the year, all around the country, there's motorsports taking place. And of course, now due to coronavirus, things are slow. Can we know what your top speed is? Well, I done the top speed of 332 kilometers per hour in a controlled environment, and it was actually more for record purposes. A lot of these questions, right? Basically, X1 Racing League is a league that we put together to give people an opportunity to actually find an entry into motorsport in the country, not just for race drivers, but for engineers as well. And the idea is to spread the knowledge of motorsport in India, and hopefully over the years to come, that will be a possibility, and people will get more opportunities in motorsport. What about your first race? I was 11 years old when I did my first race, and it was a go-kart. And at what age I started to race? I just answered was 11 years old. Is DRS used in GT3 cars and LMP cars like F1? Well, DTM cars, yes, they use DRS. LMP cars also, but a lot of LMP cars particularly use a KERS-like system, like Formula One. So yes, there are different DRS. For those of you who are watching, is the drag reduction system. What are the new advancements in the racing world? Every day there are new advancements in the racing world. I would say electric technology is obviously some of the latest advancements, and the way electric is advancing makes it interesting. What I saw this year, particularly what interested me, was a system that Mercedes Formula One team was running called the DAS, which basically allowed the alignment of the car to change. In a straight line, the wheels would be straight, and then as the driver braked for the corner, the steering wheel would move in and the toe would go out. So I found this very, very interesting. It was called the DAS. Do you think battery cars can be survived compared to internal combustion engines? Well, yes, of course, battery cars, like I said, is the future, and it's something that we will see happening. But again, internal combustion cars are going to be around for a long, long time. So it's only going to be interesting to see how things change over the next 10 years. Which is the best race car in India? I would think the Formula 2000, which is the MRA Formula 2000, is the best race car, which is mostly built in India and runs in India as well. Can we play Forza Horizon with G24? Does it help in sim racing? Yes. It is, of course, an older version of Steering Wheel. Forza is a very good game. And yes, of course, you can play it and enjoy it and participate with people from around the world, which helps for sim racing. What about crash analysis of a car? I'm sorry, I need more details in that question. What is the max horsepower of a race car? Again, the whole point of this presentation was to show you the different forms of race cars, and I think you could see that right from 40 bhp all the way up to 1000 bhp and more, you have race cars. So the maximum of horsepower can be really beyond 1000 bhp even for a racing car, because there are many, many different forms of motorsport. We've seen race cars with 1500, 1800 bhp as well. Then you have drag racing cars with the 4000, 5000 bhp, maybe more. So yeah, I mean, horsepower can go up to very, very high levels. Tips for entrepreneurs in the racing world? Well, it's a tough world. It's not easy. It's a very small space, and there are very few people in it. So I think what's important for any budding entrepreneur for the racing world is to be innovative. Motorsport gives you an opportunity to play with various different forms in the sport. And like I showed you, there are many different forms of the sport available. And I think that would be the best, is to actually be innovative and try and work with different formats, different forms of motorsport, to make it more interesting for an audience, and to make it also more interesting for people to come and be a part of, be it a race driver, be it an engineer, be it a part of the management. You want to have people who want to be a part of this sport, and for that you have to make it interesting. How to join a foreign manufacturer team? Well, I do have a few friends who are with foreign manufacturer teams, and it's all about just simply sending cold emails at some point, because I'm sure you have a very strong educational background, and as long as you can show them that you have a good educational background, and as long as you've done some amount of good internship work, and you've showed great results for it as well, there's a good scope of joining a foreign manufacturer team. Can simulator data be compared with live data? I know it's precise. How dateful? So, well, there's different apps that people are using actually for simulator data, and in many ways, the basic techniques can be compared with live data. Like I said, the basic setup of the car as well can be compared with the real world setup. So, yes, I would say it's possible. I do know a few people who do have simulator coaching academies as well. And from what I've heard from them, yes, they do a lot of coaching inside the simulator, which then translates to the real world. It's precise, but obviously it's not 100% precise like the real world car, because there's no actual G forces coming to you. The steering wheel gives you force feedback, but it's not 100% the same. Best moment as my racing career, obviously winning races. Can we use an 800cc car as a saloon? 1800cc car as a saloon? Yes, of course you can use an 1800cc car as a saloon, as long as it is a touring car or a saloon car with a roof. And I would say an 1800cc car, a Skoda, I imagine a Skoda Octavia. Yes, you can. Which is your favorite circuit? Nürburgring would be your best simulator in sim racing. There are many different simulators in sim racing, but I did look a few up, and there's one called SimCube, which I think would be really good. I haven't tried it, but I think it's something that would be very good. In India, can India be a platform for high-level motor racing? Well, that's a very good question, actually. It's an expensive sport. And what we're seeing, how manufacturers are able to combat that by actually putting financial support into it, is great. And also sponsors like MRF, JK Tyre, TVS, etc. Yes, in the long run, it will bring a very high level of motor racing to the country. I'm aware that a lot of people from Asia as well want to somehow be a part of motorsport in India, and hopefully soon we'll see that. Ever tried off-roading? Well, yes, of course. It's the step in an automobile career you can take to get into the field of motorsport racing. Well, if you're an automobile engineer and you want to get into the field of motor racing, the first step would obviously be to go to a racetrack. And again, my assumption is that you live in or around Chennai, and we have a racetrack here. Just out of your own interest, go there. The engineers are very approachable. The teams are very approachable. Feel free to go and talk to them. Understand more to what motorsport, what goes into motorsport, and once you can ignite that fire within you, you'll definitely find a way to get into motorsport, because the opportunity is there to be a part of it. Where was I born? I was born in Chennai. Got the chance to work with Team M Sport for the last 8 months. It's very useful. There you go. A lot of people. He's actually gone to M Sport, which is a very popular racing team based in Chennai. And by working with M Sport, it's very useful to improve your knowledge, because you're actually doing field work in a competitive environment. And I would advise everyone to do that. Formula Bharat. Well, I'm not too well versed with the Formula Bharat machine, so I wouldn't really be able to help you with that. What problems do you face at the racetrack? It is a very competitive environment. For the driver, usually the problem is the cars that sometimes give you problems, but I mean, it's part of the sport. And of course, it's hot in India. What failure did you face to get this position? Share experiences. It's a tough sport. There's a lot of ups and downs, but at the end of the day, you have the perseverance pays, and you have to really want to win to be able to do it. And as you start looking through failure, and you look at what the success is beyond that. So I wouldn't really be able to pinpoint any particular failure, because you can't really. You usually erase that from your memory, and you always go for success. What's your favorite car? Say an Audi R8 GT3 car, because that's what I race and that's what I know better than any other car. What's the best Formula car to race now in this current year? Well, if you're in India and you're starting out, the Formula LGB, and if you then want to take it to the next step, it's the Formula 1600. That would be a good car to actually race this year. Can a designer get a job in a racing field? Yes, of course. There's many opportunities for designers in the racing field. Once again, like I said, it's all about going to the racetrack, meeting people, and understanding really how you can take it forward. But yes, there are many opportunities available in the racing field for designers. Do race drivers get training to get to be well with G-force? Yes, of course, we train to combat G-force. G-force is a big enemy of race drivers, but it's something that we have to fight and make sure that we make better of. Do we have hybrid cars in racing events? Not in India, but worldwide, yes, there are hybrid cars, particularly in the World Endurance Championship. The LMP1 cars are hybrid racing cars. Favorite car that I've driven? A bunch of cars. Lancia Delta Integrale would be my favorite car. Is there any training that you give for racing? Yes, there are many people who give training for racing, and like I said, again, just have to go to a racetrack, look it up online, and you'd be able to do it. What type of feedback will you be giving after you complete a session? What are the differences from an Indian car to an Audi GT car? Now, this is a very interesting question. Well, when you finish a session and you come back and you sit with an engineer, you actually look back at the entire session. You start to talk as a driver. You don't really look at anything with the engine. You look at the suspension and the handling issues that you can combat and you can solve if there are any. So you divide every corner into three parts. There's entry, there's apex, there's exit. And you then start to discuss with the engineer where you felt right from the brakes, how the brakes felt, to your turn into the mid corner to the exit. And then you talk about understeer, you talk about oversteer, you talk about the grip, you talk about the lean, you talk about the pitch. And then you start to work around how you can make these things better. So obviously when you brake, you have pitch, then when you turn in, you have roll. So all these things are what you discuss with the engineer. The differences from an Indian car to an Audi car, of course, the Audi is very, very advanced compared to the regular Indian race cars. But if you look at something like the Volkswagen Ameo as a basic Indian race car, it is very advanced as well. But obviously not as advanced as the Audi, because you've got a big engine in the back of the car. It's naturally aspirated. You've got all these buttons on the steering wheel, a lot of electronic aid as well. Whereas the Indian car is as basic as it gets. Does Mahindra enter into F1? I don't know. It's a good question. What are the official sim racing games which are official? Well, Gran Turismo is an official game for the FIA, which is the world governing body of motorsport. And then, of course, there are some games which a lot of race drivers use, like iRacing and rFact. Toyota is moving to the next generation. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how Toyota does it. Sim racing means Forza Horizon or like individual game. There's, like I just mentioned, there are many games. iRacing and rFactor for PC, Gran Turismo, Forza, Formula One for PlayStation, etc., etc. This session remind me of thank you. Future hybridization of cars make race. What would be your ideas? So, like I said, there are already hybrid cars racing in the World Endurance Championship. They're starting to use them also more frequently around the world. It would be very interesting actually to see hybridization of cars, and it will make motorsport very, very interesting. But again, it seems like the electric mobility is taking over faster. So let's see which one really wins between the two. All the cars are at the highest level for racing. Electric cars are coming. I've answered this question for a few people before. Any sensors in the race car? I'm sorry, I don't understand that question. There are many sensors in the race car. which is the highest horsepower car in India. I would assume you're talking about race cars. That's the MRF 2-liter car would be the highest horsepower single-seater race car, 230-ish bhp. Then drag racing cars in India with 500-600 plus bhp. So yes. How do you contact me? Through your college. You can speak through Mr. Motilal over here, and he'll help you contact me. How's your experience in the Nürburgring? It was great. What is the fuel capacity in a race car? It varies from car to car. Well, working in a local team, yes, of course, working in a local team will help you reach international teams. A lot of the local teams here have international contacts as well. And if you are really want to achieve it, you can do it, and you can definitely move to international teams. Race car costs change, but there's a lot of questions here. I'm sorry I won't be able to answer all of them. But I would like to thank you all for being here today. It was a great response, and I'm really happy that I see so many questions here from so many of you. I hope it was very insightful. And I would love to do this more often. I'd like to thank KCG College for having me here and being a part of this. And I would love to see you again soon. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful session on the insights into the motorsport world. I now invite Dr. T. Motilal, Head Department of Automobile Engineering, to deliver the vote of thanks.
So good afternoon to all. It's my privilege to propose vote of thanks for this webinar. I thank Mr. Aditya Patel for accepting our invitation and delivering lecture on opportunities inside the world of motorsports. Thanks for spending your valuable time with us. It was a wonderful session, sir. Thank you so much. The session is an eye-opener to the world of motorsports, and we learned that the opportunities lies within this world and which is yet to be explored by our engineering students. We also understood that the continuous adaptation by the motorsport world through sim racing can provide the opportunity to identify the hidden talent among our youth. We also understood that the complexity of the design and performance of the motorsport vehicle poses the challenges to the engineers to meet the requirements, which makes the engineers as important as the race driver. So I also express my sincere gratitude to our director madam, principal, associate dean, placement officer, Nibin, all the KCG faculties, and special thanks to our automobile faculty for the support and encouragement to the webinar. I also extend my sincere thanks to all the participants for the cooperation, for actively participating and posting their queries. Thank you all.